Actually, maybe we can start with another short loving-kindness meditation, and then I want to talk a little bit more about attachment and how to deal with that, and then time for some question-answer. So this time, loving-kindness will sort of expand that out towards others. And we'll keep it a little bit shorter this time, the meditation. So setting the body into a state of relaxation, stillness, and vigilance. Vigilant posture is to keep the back nice and straight. And at the same time allowing the entire body to become completely relaxed, completely at ease. And using the out-breath to relax and release any tightness or tension in any part of the body. Allowing the breathing to settle into its natural rhythm. The breathing flowing naturally and effortlessly. And allowing the mind to come to rest in the present moment. Focusing on the sensations of the breath throughout the body. No matter how much mental afflictions are in our mind, no matter how much attachment, anger, jealousy, and so forth are in our mind, they're not part of the nature of our mind. They're merely covering the surface of our mind. And beneath those mental afflictions is the natural purity of our mind. So imagine this deepest dimension of your mind this inner purity of your mind in the form of a small, white, radiant sphere of light in the center of your chest at the level of your heart. And then arouse the thought, how wonderful it would be if I had happiness and its causes. May I be truly well and happy. And then with each out-breath, imagine rays of light radiating out from the sphere of light at your heart, filling your entire body and mind. Imagining the light transforms into everything you need to be happy. So with each out-breath, breathe out the light of loving kindness, sending to yourself whatever you need to be happy in the short term and the long term. And then imagine you've now found that state of genuine happiness, of inner well-being. And simply rest in that state of inner purity of mind. And then allow your field of loving kindness to expand out to the person seated next to you. They are just like yourself in wanting to be happy. So arouse the thought, how wonderful it would be if they had happiness and its causes. May you be truly well and happy. And then with each out-breath, imagine rays of light radiating out from your heart, filling their body and mind, transforming into everything they need to be happy. So with each out-breath, breathe out the light of loving kindness, sending to them whatever they need to be happy. And then imagine they've now found the genuine happiness that they seek. And take joy in this. And then allow your field of loving kindness to expand out further. And allow your mind to move around. And whoever comes to mind, attend to them. May you have happiness in its causes. May you be truly well and happy. Breathing out the light of loving kindness, sending to them whatever they need to be happy. And allow no matter how much light is sent out, it is sent out from an inexhaustible source that is in no way depleted. Allowing the mind to continue to move around, breathing out the light of loving kindness. Then release all appearances and simply allow the mind to come to rest. Resting in that inner purity of mind, that inner well-being. In the nature of loving kindness. Just two more things I'd like to briefly mention about attachment. So before the break, remember we saw that there's a big difference between loving kindness and attachment. That loving kindness in relationship, of course, is simply the wish for that person to be happy without, of course, expecting anything in return. Whereas attachment in a relationship, it's all about me and my happiness, and wanting that person to make us happy. And so attachment actually sees the other person as a thing or object to satisfy me. So again, we need to distinguish these two dynamics, which are usually present in all relationships, and increase the healthy part, the loving kindness, and decrease the unhealthy part, the attachment, and then our relationships will improve. And also, often another doubt or confusion with attachment is that, because from a Buddhist perspective, we want to eliminate attachment 100%. But then often people feel as if I try and get rid of my attachment, my life is going to become very bland and boring, that I'm not going to be able to enjoy life anymore. I'm not going to be able to enjoy the simple pleasures in life anymore. Actually, it's the exact opposite. Our craving and attachment interferes with our enjoyment of the simple pleasures in life now. Because when we have craving and attachment for the simple pleasures in life, as we saw earlier, generally what comes with that is worry and anxiety about not getting it, not getting enough of it, losing it, frustration when we don't get it, overindulging when we do get it, disappointment when it doesn't live up to our expectations, getting upset when we lose it, and so forth. And again, also the fact that with craving and attachment, it's never satisfied. Craving and attachment is always looking for something bigger, better, and different. And we know this from our own experience. If we get something that we like too often, after a while, craving and attachment goes, sorry, that's not good enough anymore. I want something bigger, better, and different. And this was really highlighted to me some years ago when I did my first long meditation retreat. I was in Spain on the side of a mountain in a retreat centre with a hut, and it was a place that provided meals. So every day a basket got delivered near my hut with some food. Very nutritional food, but the menu tended to be quite repetitive, more or less the same food every week. And even if it's food we like, if we're eating it week after week, it doesn't take too many days of eating the same food where we go, oh, not that again. My experience was the exact opposite. After a month of eating the same food, it started tasting better. And I was convinced the cook was putting more effort into the cooking. But then after a couple more weeks, it kept tasting better. And then after about 6 or 7 weeks, I realised this is exactly the same food as 6 weeks ago. And what I realised was actually happening was being in retreat, my craving and attachment was settling down. And I was starting to enjoy the food much more without the craving and the attachment. And similarly, I was in a retreat hut on the side of a mountain with a very big, spacious view, very nice view. But again, if we go to a place that has a nice view, after a few days we don't even notice it anymore. My experience was it kept getting more beautiful. And even very little insignificant things like a tiny little flower was like, after some weeks, was, wow, that's so beautiful, so amazing. So what I realized was that because of my craving and attachment subsiding, I was actually enjoying the simple pleasures in life to a level I've never enjoyed previously in my entire life. So I think this is what Buddhism says, and from my experience, if we can reduce our craving and attachment, we'll enjoy the simple pleasures in life much more than we've ever done before. But then people still have a doubt often that comes up, and that is, okay, that may be true, but I'm a creative person and I need craving and attachment to be creative. exact opposite again. Of course, mental afflictions like craving, attachment, jealousy, anger provide a lot of fuel for creativity, a lot of subject material, but they're not the source of creativity. In fact, they interfere with creativity because creativity comes from a deeper level of our mind. And as long as our mind is caught up in mental afflictions, we're literally suffocating our creativity. Creativity really comes through when our mind is very still and quiet. So if we can reduce and eliminate mental afflictions like craving and attachment, we'll become more creative. Because that space for creativity to emerge will be more there. And also now we tend to be creative for a little bit selfish motivation and often, look at how wonderful a musician or artist I am. Whereas I think the truly great creative people on the planet are the ones who use their creative talents to inspire others for a worthwhile reason, purpose. So if we can reduce our craving and attachment, we'll become more creative for a more meaningful reason. So therefore, the bottom line is if we can reduce our craving and attachment, we'll enjoy the simple pleasures in life more, our relationships will improve, and we'll become more creative for a more meaningful reason. One last point, and then some time for some questions. How to deal with attachment? Well, the first step, of course, is to understand attachment, to understand that it's not helpful at all, that it actually creates problems. So to clearly understand what we mean by the word attachment, which we briefly looked at, and therefore to see the disadvantages of attachment. And together with that, to have a better worldview, this idea of these two types of happiness, to shift our worldview. Because if our worldview is that happiness is out there, craving and attachment will follow for sure. If we can not only see the disadvantages of craving and attachment, but at the same time understand the two types of happiness, the temporal happiness and the genuine happiness, and understand there's no genuine happiness to be found out there, that it's within ourselves, if we can make that shift, then we have a chance to reduce and eliminate attachment by seeing the disadvantages and moving our worldview, our perspective to genuine happinesses within ourselves. And then how to deal with attachment. The first thing we need to do is to improve our mindfulness. It's all well and good to say, I'm going to reduce my attachment. But the reality is that we tend to be stimulus reaction machines. Some stimulus comes, if it's pleasant, attachment. Unpleasant, aversion. Instant. Boom. So if we don't have mindfulness, we can have all the will in the world to want to get rid of our attachment. It's not going to happen. But there is a window of opportunity between stimulus and reaction. That window may be very short, maybe a second or two. Without mindfulness, we're not going to be able to catch that window between stimulus and reaction. So we want to be able to use that window of opportunity. The only way we're going to do that is with mindfulness, through the concentration, shamatha practice. If we improve our mindfulness, stimulus comes, then before we react, we go, oh, okay. And then we've got a chance to do something instead of just react. What to do? One thing, of course, is simply notice that pleasant stimulus. And if some attachment is arising, just notice it, watch it as it arises and passes. Don't identify with it and follow it. So mindfulness can be very effective in simply not reacting. Is catching that window, and if some attachment starts to arise, simply observe it arise and pass without engaging in it. And then, of course, on top of that mindfulness, we can apply what's called antidotes. And we can do this from the sort of two main wings of practice. The one we briefly looked at a little bit earlier was the wisdom wing. That applying an antidote through wisdom can mean, for example, impermanence, is to see that this stimulus is impermanent, arising, passing, rising, passing. Or, at a deeper level in Vipassana, we can use the emptiness practice Particularly if something pleasant is appearing, where is the beauty in the object? Where is the me that is having attachment? Where is the attachment? If we can do this, we can dissipate that attachment. Or alternatively, we can use the compassion wing of practice. And here, particularly this evening, we looked at loving kindness. So again, if it's with respect to another person, generally the craving and attachment comes because we're having first-person perspective. What can I get out of this? And then craving and attachment usually follows. Whereas if we can adopt a second-person perspective and see the situation from the perspective of the other person, then we're more likely to cultivate loving kindness toward them rather than attachment. So we can use that as well. So these are some ways, very simply, of how we can start to work with attachment. So that's all I really wanted to talk about this evening. So we've still got 10 minutes or so for any questions. So if anyone has any questions about anything from this evening.
Just want to clarify, is the practice of concentration related to meditation?
Right. Of course, any practice has two parts: meditation and what we do for the rest of the day. You know, sometimes I hear Buddhist people talking amongst themselves, and one will ask the other, "When do you do your practice?" And the other one says, "Oh, I do it every morning at 6:30 for half an hour or an hour." If this is our idea of practice, we're not going to get very far. Because we can diligently meditate every morning for 30 minutes or even an hour, but then if we jump up and run around like crazy for the rest of the 14 hours, we're working against, with mindlessly reacting. Then, is 30 minutes of mindfulness versus 14 hours of mindlessness, or 30 minutes of loving kindness, 14 hours of craving and attachment? I mean, which one is going to win out? So therefore, regardless of the practice, we need both. So here, in terms of concentration, we need both. We need to meditate, and of course the meditation practice is often called shamatha practice. So often in many Buddhist traditions that will involve simply focusing on the breath or observing some other object. So it involves usually focusing on a single object in meditation for 15 minutes, 30 minutes, whatever we can manage. But then, of course, we need to continue the rest of the day, which means that we need to keep working on mindfulness the rest of the day, to actively work on improving mindfulness, and that will feed back in. So yes, the concentration practice has these two parts: meditation, where we're focusing on a single object, and then the rest of the day we're trying to cultivate and improve mindfulness.
Thanks.
Sure. Any other questions?
Thank you very much. Really enjoyed the evening. Just building on the previous question, can you maybe share some tips, practical tips, how to start this journey? So the meditation element is more or less clear, but right. Can you talk a little bit about some practical...
For meditation?
No, just how to start this journey
sure,
towards...
Okay, yeah. And this is really based on my own experience in talking to many people, is that we have very strong habits. We tend to be very heavily influenced by other people and stimulus around us. And the reality is, if we want to change that as a beginner, it's very difficult because we've got very strong habits. We're easily influenced by others. So we really need... one way of looking at it is two things. Like, the analogy is, that if we plant a seed in the ground and we want that to grow into a big, healthy tree or bush, we need two things. We need to protect it so it doesn't get squashed or eaten, and we need to nurture it. So similarly, if something is sprouted in our mind and we want to change our life and so forth, if we want that really to happen, that it doesn't get squashed or whatever, we need to protect and nurture. So protect in this case means to try, particularly as a beginner, protect ourselves from heavy negative influences, you know, because there are things and people that whenever we get in contact with these things or people, we usually react in not a very good way. So we need to give ourselves a bit of space from these negative influences. We're not talking about running away, we're talking about stepping back a bit, because later we need to face these things to go further, actually. But as a beginner, if we find ourselves in in an environment where we have very heavy negative influences, we're stuck. So we need to give ourselves that bit of space, protect ourselves, and then we need to nurture. And to nurture, of course, we can talk about having a daily meditation practice, but also to work on during the day. But part of that nurture is we need help. We need help. And this is where in Buddhism this idea of Sangha comes in, spiritual community. I had strong habits, so I wanted to meditate, I wanted to change my life. Basically for 2 years, nothing happened. Nothing happened. Because I just got swept up in my old habits. It was only when I found myself in an environment with Sangha that I managed to start to do something. So I think we really need to find that Sangha, whatever form that takes. Otherwise, I think it's going to be very difficult. And one other point I want to mention on that is that we're talking about developing new habits. So I think modern studies show that to develop a habit in anything, we need to do it at least 25 or 30 days in a row. So therefore, that's just to begin develop a habit. Doesn't mean we have a habit after 25 days, but so therefore, I think, you know, if, for example, a daily meditation practice, the first step is just to develop the habit. Don't try and do too much because it'll be difficult and you'll give up. And so keep it short and just develop the habit. And to help develop the habit, meditate the same time every day. Because if you're changing the time you're meditating, you're not developing a habit. So if you can find a time that works and then just start and short and just really stick to that, and then you'll start to develop a habit. It will become a habit that, you know, that's part of my daily routine, that it's such and such a time, meditation time. So that's another thing that's going to be helpful. But really, I think the main thing is that Sangha. The Sangha. I mean, without that, if we try and do it on our own, my experience in talking to many people, it's very difficult, if not impossible, because we have strong habits and we're easily influenced by people and things around us. So that's what I can suggest.
Thanks very much.
I think we've got time for one more question.
Well, it's a sort of rather general question. Could you say a bit more about what you mean by creativity? Because it's a bit like attachment. It's a word that has hugely diverse meanings.
Creativity, yeah. I think our creativity from a Buddhist perspective, I think is just it's just the natural expression of our inner purity of our mind. And that can take many forms. And of course, that is in the nature, well, because it's come from inner purity, is with wisdom, but the expression of that is loving kindness, compassion. And that can take many forms, depending on our own individual talents. That can take a form of in music, in art. It can take a form in just helping others, in anything we do in life. Because I think that now that is being suffocated by our mental afflictions, particularly things like craving and attachment and jealousy and anger and so forth. Then we react in ways that are not very productive or helpful. So I think, you know, creativity from a Buddhist perspective is just a sort of a natural expression of that inner purity. And depending on us and our own unique talents, that will take many different forms. Many different forms. Okay. Oh, last question, then we'll finish up for this evening.
Thank you so much for the lecture. my question is, because it was really interesting what you said about like negative feedback from people around us. So what do you think of when, you know, we help people however we can around us, and then from those people, like, you only get things back that makes you feel even worse?
You
or
mean,
not the
they
way,
try and take advantage of you or something, you mean? Or?
like whatever
Sure,
way.
sure.
So do you think that is because the intention, your intention, how you're trying to help is not right because you expect something in return? Or what do you think of this?
Yeah. I mean, of course, there can be a number of factors here. Of course, it could be the other person just reacting in a negative way. And of course, it could also be that we are lacking in our understanding or ability of how to help people, you know. So that could also be the case. But, I mean, the bottom line is that, of course, we should try to help people, and we do the best we can using whatever level of wisdom and compassion we have now. And sometimes we do something and we say, oh, that was not good. But then we don't beat ourselves up. We just go, okay, that didn't work. Next time I know that's not the right thing to do, I'll try something else. Because there's no book you can go to that says do this, because every situation is unique, and we need to evaluate each situation on its own merit, and then using whatever wisdom and compassion we have, we respond. That's all we can do. And if we make a mistake, we learn from that. We don't beat ourselves up. One more point I wanted to mention on this is that, you know, of course we're talking about, and I think you mentioned about expecting something in return. Of course we're trying to help people in an unselfish way. But I think as a beginner, what we don't want to do is, if we're trying to do something helpful for someone, and we notice we've got a bit of a selfish motivation, that we say, okay, I'm not going to do it. I think if we have that attitude, it'd be very difficult to do anything for anyone, because we have, at some level, even a little bit the selfish motivation of expecting them to say thank you. So therefore, rather, if we notice some selfish motivation and we're trying to do something good, try and reduce that as much as possible, of course, but still do the good thing. And that even if we start doing things with a bit of a selfish motivation, hoping to get something in return, I think what you'll find, of course, that's better, that's one step better than before, because we're actually doing something useful. Before maybe we didn't help anyone. So, and then the more we do that and try and reduce selfishness as much as possible, I think what you're going to start to find is that the joy you get from simply helping versus the joy of hoping to get something in return, that'll be way more, and you'll start to be less and less selfish, and you get more and more joy just for the sake of helping the others. So it's like, you know, a gradient. And sometimes here I talk about, you know, the idea of being ego-friendly. Like, now, of course, our ego is very strong, you know, me. And then if we're trying to help someone unselfishly, our ego will get up and say, what's in it for me? Nothing in it for me. I'm not doing that. Whereas if we're doing something, expecting something back, the ego goes, okay, well, I'm getting something out of it. You can do that. So it's a little bit more ego-friendly. So what we're doing really is we're sneaking up on the ego and sort of chopping it without it realizing. Because then otherwise we'll get stuck, because we'll notice some level of selfishness in anything we do, and we'll go, I'm not going to do that because it's a little bit selfish. And then we won't be able to begin. So, you know, we need to do it in that way, I think.
Can I ask one?
Sure.
I might get a little too complicated here, but the joy that you get from helping others unselfishly, isn't that pleasure that you get from it?
No, because it's not stimulus-based. It's simply, well, at a deeper level, it's not, because you're simply connecting with this deeper nature of yourself, this inner purity of mind.
So it's kind of like going back to the same.
And you'll find that the way to distinguish that, if you have this joy when you're doing these things, is look at the quality of the joy. Is it have this sort of evenness to it, or is it sort of like agitated? If there's agitation, then there's craving and attachment coming in. If it's much more, and we do this sometimes, we see something, we have this sense of joy, but it's not like this, it's like this. So that's a more the connecting to that inner purity. So that's one way to check how much craving and attachment is there, is what is the quality of that joy? Is it like this sort of evenness to it? And, you know, in Buddhism we often talk about joy and bliss, and so people have this idea of this sort of, you know, this bliss, but actually it's this sort of deep sense of well-being is really more what we're talking about. So that versus the agitation that we get from craving and attachment. So there are many gradients of that, of course. Okay, I think we've run over time there, so let's stop there. So thanks for coming this evening. I'll be back here in 1 month's time, exactly, I think, on the 19th of March, going a little bit further in this, and we'll be talking about this bodhicitta, and particularly this, what's called exchanging self with others. So that's going to be the topic next month. So I hope to see you then, so thanks for coming.